Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We're back. We had some problems on Friday that we couldn't do the show. Now, I have to say this. I'm not a warm weather person. And with hockey season usually comes more milder temperatures. I love fall. Fall's my favorite time of the year. And this is two camps in a row, two opening of training camps in Niagara Falls for the Leafs, where it has been oppressively hot. And, I'm sure everybody's going to cry a tear for me when I give you my little brief thing. It's very, the arena that the Gale Center Arena in Niagara Falls where the Leafs are holding their training camp, they keep the rinks very cool. And that's good because, they promote that has, it's good for better ice. But when you go from that out to 85-degree temperatures, I'm wearing a hoodie inside the arena, and then down to the first day I wore a long sleeve shirt, and I think I lost 20 pounds sweating. And the last 2 days I had to wear sort of a golf shirt. And even then it was the weather was t-shirt weather, and it was ridiculous, and it was completely humid, Russ. It was just ugh.
That's how it is here today too. It's funny though, I was at a football game yesterday, and I met a couple from England, and they said yesterday's weather, which was like 82 and humid, was what they get for about 6 weeks. Then I was standing next to a guy from Calgary, and I said, "It snowed there the other day, didn't it?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I was at my son's football practice, and it was like the equivalent of 28 degrees."
Yeah, so I'm waiting for this, this late summer swelter to finally go, and we can get down to 65, that kind of temperature, and then 50 at night. That's a beautiful thing. Anyway, enough of the weather stuff. Okay, Russ, let's just briefly talk about football because
no, you got something. That's fine.
Well, okay, you don't see this every day. You see players retire at the end of seasons. You see players retire in season if they're injured. Very rarely do you see players retire at the half. And it actually probably was, I think he came, and we're talking about Vontae Davis, who is I think he was a cornerback for the Colts, who the Bills had signed as a free agent this year for not a cheap price too. And apparently in the second quarter of a dreadful game where the Bills were getting whacked 28-3 by San Diego, Vontae Davis decided to retire right in the middle of the game.
Actually, it's Los Angeles Chargers, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah. Well, okay, sue me. But yeah, it's sort of just poetic.
It's perfect for that league. That's what it is. It's because, of course, everybody's like, this doesn't really happen in any other sport. And I agreed. But look, that's the way the NFL is right now. But I got something. So I was at a thing called Keystone Comic-Con. And so it was the first one in Philly. And, they had a lot of stars there. They had wrestlers like Tommy Dreamer wrestled live there. He had his whole thing. That was fun. And people can go see that on my Instagram account. And later on Sportsology, I'll have some stuff. But on Sportsology, the first thing I put up was they had a reunion of 5 of the cast members of The Office. And so I don't know, did you guys watch The Office?
The American one or the English one?
The American one.
I know who was on it. I didn't watch it.
Peter?
Nope.
Okay. Well, here's the funny thing. So one of the clips that I have is Leslie, who played Stanley on The Office, talking about how the Brits were mean to these guys when the series started in the U.S.
Right.
It's never going to work, yada, yada, yada. We should have been asked to do it. That kind of thing. I think that's kind of interesting. There was a bunch of interesting tidbits. Obviously, I'm not going to say them all because, people want to hear hockey. But one of the other ones was at one point, Steve Carell, they finished their first season. They did I don't know, because they came in half season or something. And then they did 6 shows of a second season. And then they were gone for 2 months because they weren't sure if the show was going to be picked up.
Right.
So Steve Carell had a chat with everybody saying, "Hey, it's been a great 12 shows, and love the cast. It's been really a lot of fun." And of course they got picked up, and there's more to it in the video clip, but it's interesting because they did 190 something shows.
Yeah.
And they thought 12 into it, that was it for them. And it wasn't.
Well, I thought the same thing. I think the same thing happened to Seinfeld too. I think Seinfeld was a summer replacement or so. Well,
It was.
one of those yeah, and it didn't get great ratings, but NBC sort of stuck with it, and then it blew up. So,
and then one other funny thing. So, Angela, whose the real name is Angela in real life, she worked in accounting. Before she had that show, she worked at 1-800-Dentist.
Wow.
oh,
He was
God.
like, when people called the 1-800-Dentist, she was one of the call center people.
Yeah. And I'll just briefly, I could go on about the NFL and ad nauseum, but I won't. I saw that there was an event at the University of Buffalo Center for the Arts on Friday that was sort of unique. I know our mutual friend Brian Metzer met John Cusack at a Comic-Con in Pittsburgh recently. Well, Cusack is doing a tour of, I guess, universities with the movie Say Anything, which is like
Right.
I think it's close to a 30th anniversary of the movie, which blows me away because I was an usher in a movie theater when that movie came out. But it was watch the movie and then a Q&A with a number of people. And I tried to ask a question, but the line was really long, couldn't get through. The one thing that I've heard this is that he hates the movie Better Off Dead. He can't stand it.
Yeah, at least he's gotten used to hearing I want my $2. He won't block you anymore on Twitter.
Well, but the thing is, Russ, some idiot kid, like 15 years old, walks up to the mic and says, Mr. Cusack, I only have one question for you. Where's my $2? And like everybody,
somebody's going to do that.
it's just it's so annoying. And the thing was, he was sort of gracious. He's like, there are movies that I did for money. There are movies that I did that I don't, I don't like, but I'm not going to say which ones because I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
But honestly, with kids like that who come up to the microphone and say that, or other people, it's just no wonder he hates the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about Say Anything is, I never once got a boombox and tried to hang out somebody's window, hold it over my head, and play In Your Eyes. Now, only because there's so many better Peter Gabriel songs. Like, why would I choose that one?
What, you're going to put the boombox up and play San Jacinto or something like that? No.
Shaking the tree.
Hill, maybe
Shaking the tree.
Games Without Frontiers.
Games Without Frontiers would be good. No, maybe Shock the Monkey. That would get people. That would get the parents.
Sledgehammer.
Moribund the Burgermeister. Anyway, start the show.
All right.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, September 17th, 2018.
I'm Peter Tessier up in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and I'm schwitzing, man. It's hot here.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Let's start off with something that happened over the weekend, and I have to tip my hat to Mr. Tessier here because he sort of called it a couple days before it actually came to fruition. But Josh Morrissey, one of the, I think it's down to 6 or 7 restricted free agents in the NHL. Morrissey was one of them until this weekend, where he signed a 2-year bridge deal for $3.15 million per. Now, I think that's a good amount on a bridge deal for the Jets. The only thing I question here, Peter, is getting him locked up long term. I think you're just sort of pushing it down the road here, and I didn't think that the Jets were going to do that with somebody who I think they could have gotten under control for 5 or 6 years at a reasonable amount.
The Jets wanted to go long term. Morrissey and his agent did not. They were pushing for the bridge deal. And if given how you look at what Jacob Trouba went through, not so much the holdout part, but the idea that he's now pushed himself up to $5.5 million minimum
right
on his next deal by going this route, it makes sense for Morrissey to take the risk. And I guess probably the long-term deal that the Jets wanted weren't valuing the UFA years high enough that he would go into. And I bet you that's where everything sort of hung up. So to that point, I received a little bit of information late last week about the status of the deal and what was going on. And basically was told bridge deal to be signed, and the but was, and I put this in the blog, was that the Jets left the door open for Morrissey to think about the long-term deal. So maybe they moved some numbers around a little bit to sweeten and said they'd agreed on terms of the bridge deal. That wasn't the problem, but here's what you could do. Think about it. and it's believed there was a 7-year deal out there for the taking, and they opted to go with the bridge. Now, no one knows any numbers on this other deal. There's other than that, it was, think about it for a day or two and then do what you want. So, Morrissey and his camp played to what they wanted to do. Good for the Jets. He'll be back. He's been skating lots around town and preseason before training camp, officially started. And, he'll be in the fold now, and life goes on.
He got a pretty high AAV for the bridge deal, though. He did, because, usually if a team really, in my estimation, wins the battle, like that would have been like 2.85 a year. If you did,
So that's what Subban got from Montreal, but that's years ago.
That's years ago. But there are some Jets fans who are a little more militant in sort of their approach on this, who believe that that bridge deal shouldn't have been at 3.15. It should have been around 2.5. And saying, if you're not, look, the guy's playing your number one left D.
Right.
You're going to pay him. It's just a matter of what do you pay him that you can afford versus what the market is for number one left D. But if you go through all the teams in the NHL and you look at number ones, is Josh Morrissey the same kind of player as a number one left D that you see across the league? I mean, that's the question. He's not there. Exactly, Russ. And I think that's one of the things that is the Jets know he's not there yet, but they want to pay him to get there. And
they also want a good negotiation on the next deal.
Yeah. So, this just pushes it down. I mean, the bridge deal is not the worst thing for the Jets, but right now they have just over $6 million in cap space. Everyone signed, roster done. Things are going to get awfully interesting next year when Wheeler's extension eats up half of that.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Laine and Connor need new deals too.
Well, in 2 years, it'll have an impact before 2 years when some of these.
Next summer.
I know, but like, even though some of these guys have gotten like 2-year bridge deals, after those deals are signed that you're talking about, they're gonna trim some players. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, they have to. So, I mean, the nice thing for the Jets is they're all lined up, and I would expect that with that $6 million in cap space, they, depending on how the season goes, what they find, they use it come the trade deadline and try and do something.
Hey, I think Kevin Cheverdayoff has done a great job. I know fans were like a couple of years ago, like seething because they weren't making the playoffs and he's not making deals and he's not signing anybody. And, fast forward a couple of years later with a little bit more patience and things look really good. Things are in line. The cap is well managed. Like they've kept most of their players. Like this is a very big success for them.
Yeah.
But they possibly, get to a Stanley Cup.
But they can manage and until a certain point, and then you're going to have to make tough decisions. And I mean, that's sort of going on in Edmonton right now. And we were talking before we went live about Darnell Nurse, and I think that the Morrissey deal sort of slots Nurse in, because I think they're similar type of defensemen. I think Morrissey's a little better. I think Morrissey's got a higher offensive.
Yeah, he has a higher
upside than Nurse will. But I think they're both good defensemen. But if the want of the Oilers or the want of Nurse is to go bridge, then I think they can use the Morrissey deal as a template. But I don't know where that stands. It seems to be a stalemate right now. So I don't know, Russ. I mean, I look at Edmonton and I'm like, they got to get this guy signed, especially with how putrid their defense was last year, and the fact they lost Sekera and he's going to be out probably the entire year. They got to get him signed.
I mean, we say that. Here's the thing. I mean, again, I don't think Nurse wants a bridge deal, and that's why, hence the holdout, right? That's why he's not there.
Right.
I think if he was going to accept the bridge deal, knowing that Morrissey's deal was done, we'd have heard something already today. Like, all right, look, he's coming in and he'll get $3 million a year, because he'll probably get a little under Morrissey. That's the way I see it. Even though, yes, he's tougher, he might play tougher minutes, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's getting more than Morrissey on a bridge deal.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think he is in line for a long-term deal there, because of their situation. Like if they really want to slot him in, they've got to pay him now. And if they don't, they are going to risk him missing some games. I don't know if he's guaranteed to come in now. I don't look at it that way because I think his agent is looking at the situation and saying, listen, you're going to get thrown to the wolves this year because of the way this defense is. You need to get paid for this.
Yeah, because if you take a short-term deal, this could negatively affect you because of what's happened with this team.
Yeah.
And you add up the fact that basically, and you can sort of discount Vancouver a little bit because they did goofy things, the whole division has loaded up.
Yes.
Like the Oilers are the only team in the Pacific Division who stood pat and did nothing.
Yeah, they're always like, some of their youngsters come through. That's
I mean, so to your point of risk, Russ, Nurse is going to say like, well, yeah, no, if I take a bridge deal, I could be hooped on my stats, right? Like I could just be torched because this team's done nothing. Like, I mean, it's an interesting thing. Here's another question. You use the term holding out. I don't look at him as holding out. They haven't reached a deal.
Did I use holding out?
He's holding out. I mean,
technically, it's not holding out because he doesn't have a contract.
No.
It's a contract.
And he's not saying he's not giving an ultimatum.
No. It doesn't matter. Is he there for camp? Is he there for preseason games?
He doesn't have a I wouldn't go to camp if I didn't have a contract.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, if you're going to say he doesn't have a contract, then he and I basically are in the same boat as far as getting signed for Edmonton again. I think that's just silly. I think he is holding out because otherwise he's expected to be in camp and to be playing games. And a lot of times guys will come in on good faith, like for camp, until they get signed. He didn't even do that. So to me, it's a holdout.
Yeah, Russ, one of you is worth $3 million a year. The other one isn't, and I'm not going to specify which.
Yeah, I know it's going to be interesting, and unfortunately, with everything with Edmonton, right? And I feel bad for the fans, and I kind of feel bad for the team, even though I don't really care for them. But everything with Edmonton,
you don't feel that bad for them. You know what you feel bad for them? You feel bad for them like you're in a restaurant and you see a guy ordered something. You look on his thing because your food hasn't come yet. You say, "Oh, I'm glad I didn't order that." That's how bad.
That's exactly. That's how I feel bad. Fair enough.
It's Schadenfreude. That's what it is.
Yeah, Schadenfreude.
You're taking the pleasure in somebody else's demise.
But everything with Edmonton turns completely bonkers because nothing goes smooth with them. Nope. And it's like there's this dysfunction within the organization that doesn't allow something to transition nice. It's either over the top, it's knee jerk, it's this. And maybe the only thing that went smoothly for them was in the last while was McDavid's extension. Maybe that. Otherwise, everything just seems to be bonkers for them.
Well, and we don't know what's going on the inside, and we don't get too many good reports about it. So I think even, the media is in a fair amount of darkness as to what's going on. So it does appear that way. We don't know. Like for all we know, they're confident in youngsters. Like maybe they plan on Yamamoto slotting in. Maybe they plan on a few of these other things that we're not really anticipating.
Yeah.
They have some players, there's no question, and Cam Talbot can certainly play. So they're not bereft of everything. And they're certainly, even though I think they're going to struggle to make the playoffs, I can't say for sure they're not a playoff team. When we do our previews, you'll find out then what I think. But at the end of the day, there are worse teams, right? I mean, that's the way you have to look at it.
Well, okay. Well, there's still 6 restricted free agents. I mentioned Miles Wood. That's low down on the pay scale, so to speak. But I'm sure he scored 17 goals, so I'm sure he probably wants a significant raise from his ELC. William Nylander, Reinhart, Sam Reinhart, Nick Ritchie, Darnell Nurse, and Shea Theodore. I'm assuming Theodore wants a long-term deal in Vegas after the year that he had, and I'm not sure the fact that it's still sort of an impasse going on right now that
what happened?
No, just getting that weird feedback. But interesting that with the Nylander situation, Russ, because I was in Niagara Falls all weekend for the Leafs training camp, and Kyle Dubas spoke to a bunch of students from Brock University's sports business program on Saturday, and somebody asked him a question about Nylander, and he said, basically said, well, we're trying to get him signed as soon as possible, but we're not going to break any records when it comes to signing William Nylander. So, we've already set a sort of a blueprint, and he mentioned Morgan Riley's name, but by extension, you factor in Kadri and John Tavares.
Right.
All these guys took less for long-term deals. Kadri 4.5 at 6 years, Riley $5 million at 6 years, which looks like a bargain right now compared to some other defensemen. And Tavares was offered $13 million from San Jose and took 11. So in negotiations with Nylander, the Nylander side, Louis Gross, who is also the agent for Torrey Krug and for Johnny Gaudreau, and they held out. They apparently have broached an offer close to Draisaitl, 8.25. And I can tell you right now that the Leafs will never sign that.
Right.
Now Nylander wants the long-term deal, and apparently the Leafs want the long-term deal too, but they want an amount closer to Ehlers, closer to Sean Monahan, and not $8 million. And that's where Louis Gross and Michael Nylander, who's part of the agency, are saying, well, we're basing it on how many unrestricted years you're buying out. He's 4 years away from UFA, so it's probably going to be, at least 2, maybe 3 years of unrestricted free agency. And they're also factoring in, and I'm sure this is a factor, but they, you can't really negotiate off of this. Nick Marner is going to be a restricted free agent next year, and based on what he's going to make, based on what he's going to do playing with Tavares, he may not be in the same financial stratosphere as Nylander. You can't negotiate against a contract that's not even there yet. But I think they're almost trying to do that. So I have a feeling that Nylander's holdout for your term, Russ, but the contractual impasse, I think it's going to last through the exhibition season.
It's going to last how long?
Through the exhibition season.
And then it will be nothing but a holdout. You won't be able to call it anything else.
Peter, try logging off and logging back.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you won't be able to call it anything else at that point. You won't have any nice terminology for it.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Then it would be a holdout. But the funny thing is, Russ, and I don't know whether this is calculated or if it's just Babcock doing it on his own. But they placed Tyler Innes on the line with Matthews and Marleau at the training camp. He was talking up Kasperi Kapanen, and boy is he fast. I
told you he was going to do that.
He's talking up Andreas Janssen. Johnny's going to get there, and Josh Levo needs to work hard again. And it's basically saying, okay, well, Willie, if you're not here, we're going to move on without you. Not to say that they don't want him, but you got to come in at a reasonable amount, otherwise it's not going to work. And I think that Dubas is, I think right now, holding the line. I don't know if there's talks going on. I would assume there is, but I don't think there's a lot of room to budge here. It's either gonna be a deal in the 6.5 range at most, or it's gonna end up being a bridge like Morrissey.
So what you're still talking
Nylander, yes.
Yeah, I think it's still going to be a bridge. I don't think they will ever be able to come to an agreement this season.
I think the name that gets bantered around is that Ehlers basically signed his deal last year around this time.
Yeah.
And so 7 years, $42 million, 6 even a year. Ehlers up until that point was a .66 goal points per game player, and Nylander's a .72. You factor in a little inflation. If you could get him for 7 years at 6.5 to 6.75, you probably want to do it. And I think that's fair because this is the challenge for the Leafs, right? And we've talked about this before, but the $11 million, the $77 million they're spending on Tavares is only going to buoy the other guys. So you have to factor that the Tavares effect, and this is in theory, we haven't seen it yet, but the Tavares effect should allow the Marners and the Nylanders to excel, and the Matthews to excel even more.
Right.
So the investment in Tavares is only going to build you up. The problem is for players, they can't detach themselves from the money that goes to Tavares to the money that they're deserved, right? Like, they all want that slice of the pie. Right. And I think for Nylander to think that he wants Draisaitl money is ridiculous.
Right.
But he's also got to go and say, well, who are my comparables? And Ehlers is a great example. They're different players, but they're comparable in what they produce. They're comparable in their role. They're comparable to what they mean to the team.
Right.
And, you know, there's some inflation there, but only a year. We're not talking 2 years. We're not talking a massive salary cap increase either, as percentage of the cap too,
right.
as some people get contracts. So he's got to be reasonable in that. And also reasonable, like, look, maybe you feel you're worth $8.5 million, but not to the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're not.
Right. And the problem is, and I've heard this talked about on, you know, from many of the insiders, that, you know, one of the considerations coming out of an entry level deal, there is no trade, no move restrictions that you can place on a contract.
Yeah.
And in that instance, you know, okay, Nylander takes less to sign with the Leafs and, you know, keep everything happy and get all these guys signed. And then 3 years down the road, he's making $6 million or 6.5 million, and he gets traded to wherever, and he's got nothing to stop. And that's the risk you take. You're getting paid.
Right. That is always going to be the risk. Especially if you really hold an organization's feet to the fire, then that really becomes more of a reality. Here, look, end of the day, like you said, Kyle Dubas isn't bending. We knew that the coach would act like he's invisible and talk up the other players. He was kept
off the training camp roster, Russ.
Right.
Yeah.
73 names, and Nylander was not on it.
Morrissey wasn't on the Jets one either, and it was open on Thursday.
They're going to treat it like he's not there, like he's not a member of the team. Yeah. Season's going to start. They're going to just move on without him. And if that's what he wants, in holding or towing the line, he's going to lose this battle. Nylander will lose this battle.
I think there's no way he wins it. I don't know what a win is. If a win is getting 7 at the beginning of the number, you're not winning, or 8, you're not winning.
Preseason games, because if there were like 3 preseason games and the season started in like 2 weeks,
right,
he would have to make a big decision right away, because if he does hold out, Babcock's likely to hold it against him for a few games too.
Oh, I think more than likely, because
use things like fitness and all these time. He's going to use a lot of things, and he's going to hold him accountable to missing that, not because he wants to, but he wants him in the right shape, headspace.
We have to send him on a conditioning assignment. He'll play a few games with the Marlies, or he'll practice, on the other rink for a little while with the other guys afterwards, whatever.
Now, Peter,
so
go ahead.
I was just going to say, the other thing you have to remember about markets like Toronto is that, say Nylander takes $6.5 million on a 5-year deal. Let's just throw a number out there. And he thinks he's worth 8. He can probably make up $500,000 a year in the endorsements that are available to him in Toronto that would not be available in any other hockey city in the NHL.
Normally, I would say you're right, but and this is nothing against William Nylander, because he's a good kid from everything I've encountered, like interviewing him with the Marlies, with the Leafs. But now with Tavares, with Matthews, now with Marner, who's a Toronto area kid, basically all the air is sucked out of the room. I mean, maybe some of these other Toronto area guys. Nylander is very I jokingly called him 90-second Willie, because his post game press conferences are always 90 seconds. He's very matter of fact. Boom, boom, boom. It's done. And I don't think that there's going to be that extra ability. Maybe he gets sneaker something or other, but he's not going to be doing commercials. I don't think he's got that type of person.
Fair enough. But you know what? That's where your agent and your manager have to come in and do some image and marketing rehabilitation with them, because I know for a fact a former Toronto Maple Leaf who's from Winnipeg made a fair bit of money on endorsement deals and things around Toronto. There are a lot of things available to you, whether it be automobiles, certain things like, if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf and you're not driving $100,000 car courtesy of a dealership, you're doing it wrong.
Lou Lamoriello had a commercial on sports radio in Toronto for a car dealership. So yes, it's very possible.
Yeah, but that's a big advantage.
How good was Lou in that commercial, Mike?
But to your point, Mike, I can understand that he's good. He's after Tavares, Matthews, Marner, he's down the list.
Yes, and also, I think he's down the list in the minds of Leaf fans, and he's down the list. I think, and they'll never admit this, and this is just my opinion, I think he's down the list in terms of consideration of what type of player he is. He's a very good player, but so far in his career, when they've moved him to center, he has not stepped up. He's been a really, really good complementary player to Matthews as a playmaker and as a guy that Matthews can set up. But on his own, I mean, there's been times where he's sort of disappeared and they've put him on the fourth line, and then that sort of wakes him up and then he goes back to the first line. So it's not a consistency thing. Whereas, Marner had a bad first half of the year last year and then was arguably their MVP from January 1st on. He sort of clicked. He sort of got it. And I just think that, the long-term future of Nylander, I think, will be affected one way or the other by this contract. If this lasts, I don't think they want to deal with this every couple of years.
We got some breaking news.
Go ahead.
So it looks like Travis Sanheim will be out a week. That's what, and that's from the Matt Martin hit from yesterday.
Oh, okay.
No suspension. He got boarded by Matt Martin, which again, big shock. But Andrew McDonald's ahead of schedule, so you never know what might happen with that. So that's the word out of Flyers camp.
Now we're going to do two teams, their previews, but I'm going to go through some news and notes here. But first, Peter, before we do that, I wanted to get your thoughts, because we haven't had you since the trade, about the Carlson deal. Because, I mean, obviously the Sens management are being excoriated by everybody. And I think rightfully so, because I don't think they got as much as I thought that they were going to get. And we don't know whether Carlson will end up signing long-term in San Jose, but they didn't. I mean, I think Norris is a good prospect, and I think Tierney is an effective player, and they got a couple draft picks and a couple guys. DeMello probably is going to play in their top six, but they didn't get a Suzuki like Montreal did in the Pacioretty deal.
But here's the thing, though.
Well, let Peter say first. Then
here's the thing. Like the challenge. I hate quantity for quality deals. Like I just hate them, because I don't think it ever works out well. And when you throw into the quantity draft picks and stuff like that, you're getting lottery tickets. Mm-hmm. So this works out well for Ottawa if one of those draft picks becomes. They uncover someone in there because of that pick that they wouldn't have had access to. That's where the upside is for Ottawa. Other than that, it's kind of a wash. But if anyone expected Ottawa to get some phenomenal return at this point in the juncture, they haven't been paying attention, and that's the problem. This now became, in my opinion at least, it became a battle of, do I get absolutely nothing for him at the trade deadline because everyone knows I have to trade him, or do we hold him and keep him and prevent Colorado from getting the number one pick because they're going to stink so bad if we do trade him? And do we, or do I try and get something now that at least gives me tools to work with for the next year, so that we can build into something greater with the plan that, as Eugene Melnick said, there's going to be 16 new players on the team next year. It just goes hand in hand with that bizarre video, in that everything is just sort of happening the wrong way for the Senators. But with Carlson, it started the wrong way ages ago. And Dorian was just in a position where he had to make the best out of a lot of steaming piles of what.
Go ahead, Russ.
I think he did.
Well, so here's the thing. So we always talk about the 2003 draft as being one of the best ever. Definitely was the best one I've ever covered.
Sure.
And, one of the gems from that draft, somebody we didn't talk about at all, somebody I didn't talk about when I, did shows back then, was Joe Pavelski, right? We didn't mention him at all. He's a 7th rounder. So Josh Norris is a 1st rounder, and everybody started discounting him, thinking they know exactly what Josh Norris is right now, and we don't. And actually, to me, and he's not the same player as Joe Pavelski, they're different players, but to me, he keeps arcing up the way Joe Pavelski sort of snuck up on everybody.
Right.
And this is something where you have to look at that and say, you know, I think you need to pump the brakes on this. Like, here's the funny thing. So, like, back after the draft, this was a thing that came out about Pavelski. He was 7th round pick, and he's going to play another season in the USHL, but he had committed to Wisconsin. Now, if this was this year, if this was 2017 or 2018, and we'd be talking about that player, we'd be like, wow, he's going back to the USHL.
Right.
He can't be that good.
Yeah, but and my criticism of Ottawa is not Norris, because I think, you know, Norris is a good prospect. I don't know a lot about Rudolph Bausers, but
Bausers will play in the NHL. So
yeah, but what we're talking about here, Russ, is the fact that we were hearing Sergachev, we were hearing Heiskanen, we were hearing premier top prospects, and they didn't get that. They got,
you don't know, like Peter said, you don't know if they're going to draft one of them. They might.
Right.
You don't know if Norris will turn into one of them. I mean, I'm going to say it's probably 55% he doesn't. But again, we don't really know yet, and he has a lot of tools.
The speculated deal with Vancouver, if it had included Ulevy, I mean, even though there's been some talk about the Canucks souring on Ulevy 2 years after drafting him, that would have made sense. It's a top 5 pick. It's a kid who's is fairly well regarded. Here, you know, I think you get a couple useful NHL players in Tierney and in DeMello, but and you get extra draft picks, and you get the penalization in case they trade Karlsson back to the East. But really, they didn't get as much as many people thought they were going to get. So that's the only thing. You know, I mean, they're going to take
the other thing too, and this is where I'll disagree with Peter over the quantity thing. Ottawa does need quantity, so it did help them that way. And Tierney is a guy who had 40 points for a team where, you know, he's sort of a spare part on that team. Now that he's going to have a little bit more of a role, if he gets power play time, you know, he's going to probably get 22 goals. He'll probably get 48, 50 points. But that's a nice guy to get in this trade.
But
I'm not down on the return. I just think it's people's expectations of it being amazing based on the timelines and stuff are unreasonable given how this is all unfolded.
Yeah,
I think Dorian did as well as he was going to do.
Right.
And
I'm absolutely. That is the key.
Is it the best he could have done over the time he's had to do this? No way.
But right. The overall theme here is Ottawa is a cluster F, because not only, you know, JG Pajot goes down with an Achilles injury the same day or the day after. He's going to be out for 6 months. They don't have their 1st round pick, so this rebuild that Melnyk is selling, you know, I mean, it's like, were the Leafs rebuilding when they traded their first for Tom Curvers back in 1990? No. You know, when you trade your first a year out, and then you find out that your team is crap, which right now, and the thing is, they have a lot of good young players. Colin White, Logan Brown, Thomas Chabot. I like the kids in their organization. But if you're selling a rebuild, you have to have your 1st round pick. It's just like it's just like the Leafs and Phil Kessel. You can't say you're rebuilding when you've traded 2 1st round picks for Phil Kessel. It's incongruous.
This is what I wonder about this whole situation with Karlsson and the inevitable trade for Duchesne that was going to cost Ottawa their 1st round pick this past year, 2018 or 2019. Mm-hmm. Did they think at the draft that they had a chance of actually keeping Karlsson long term? Because if they did, why wouldn't you have sorted this out beforehand?
Well, I don't know if you could sort it out. See, the thing is, again, we have to remember, hold on, the Hoffman thing literally just went to trial. The Hoffman
thing broke before the draft.
No, but I'm saying the situation still lingers.
But they knew about the Hoffman thing going back to March.
I know, but it's just gone to trial. So how do we know Erik Karlsson didn't say to them, give me a little time here, let me think about it? And they, you know, took a chance because he's their best player. That very well may have happened, and they're never going to talk about it, and Carlson will never talk about it.
Yeah.
No, and they don't. But I mean, given what's unfolded, I mean, right now there's a really good chance, in my opinion, that Colorado it could get the first overall pick.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
that's how bad Ottawa, and that is it may not matter to the Senators.
Chance of that, if you want to talk about good percentage, is probably like 30%.
Yeah.
But if I tell you have a 30% chance of winning a lottery, you're going to look at me and say, that's not that great a chance, Ross.
I think it's better than 1 in 14 million or whatever. Right. I mean, that's right. Like that's the whole point with this. And this is what I think is so screwy about. There's so many angles to the situation that come into play, because they could have given up that pick knowing that, well, we got to get rid of Carlson because he's probably not going to sign here because of this bloody thing with Hoffman. And then they trade Hoffman.
Well, that was the case. That was the case, Peter, for them giving up the pick this year, even though he got Brady Tkachuk.
Yeah.
That was the case. I mean, and Russ, we keep hearing, it's a 25% chance of giving up Jack Hughes.
Yeah.
Well, and I was reading some stuff this morning about this top Finnish prospect. I think his last name is Kakko, Kakko, who started for them at the under 18s this year, who they think is either going to be number 1 or number 2. So you're talking between that and Hughes, you're talking 45% chance of them giving up one of those two players.
Still not a guarantee, but it's fair. But here's the other part of this. All right. So I think you can't criticize them for how they're doing the rebuild, because the rebuild is like forced on them. They didn't want to rebuild. It's circumstances that caused a rebuild. Like that's really where it's at, because of finances, because of players' contracts, because of those kinds of things. A lot of that is unavoidable in a way, because again, you didn't know 2 years ago that Ottawa fans were going to stop showing up, because essentially they have. I mean, I heard like even a preseason game against the Leafs coming up, where they normally would have 15,000, they're going to have about 8.
Yeah.
And so like that affects everything, right? So then all of a sudden you're thrown into this rebuild mode. Like so I can't kill him for that. And I won't.
All right. We'll just go get through some news and notes here. From the Seattle Times, no appeal has been filed against the $700 million Key Arena renovation. There was a deadline last week that passed without any kind of appeals, so it's full go. And according to the Seattle Times, it looks like the NHL and the city council in Seattle will work through the remaining issues, and that could put them on track for 2021. But it seemed, from the reports we got last week, it could be 21, 22. I can say this: it's going to be before the expiration of the CBA, because they want to get that $650 million in their pockets before they have to defend, that as hockey related or non-hockey related revenue. And I think that's going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
Okay, here. Let's get the laugh track ready here, folks. The Montreal Canadiens, according to TSN, the Montreal Canadiens are moving Jonathan Drouin back to the wing, but they're playing Max Domi at center.
Well, you know what? Again, but here's the thing. All right, so Max Domi has played center in his life as well, and actually, you could put the laugh track on. I'm going to say this is a smart move, because this is now freeing up Drouin, like it freed up Claude Giroux. He could probably add on 20 more points a season. Domi wasn't going to get those extra 20 points. Like Domi has become more limited in his offensive play anyhow, but he is a little more hard-nosed than Drouin. So I think this is a good move by Montreal.
I'm just saying that I feel they've made it a cottage industry to play players who I think are wingers at center. And that's what they're doing.
I'm not defending that. I can't.
Yeah, they traded Sergachev for Drouin on the premise that they were going to make Drouin into a center. And 1 year in, this is an admission of failure, and that he is a winger, and they're moving him back to the position where I think he'll thrive. I think you're right there, but it was stupid to think he could play center in the first place. So I mean, right now, Peter, their center core, according to Tony Monero of TSN Radio in Montreal is Domi, Philip Deneau, Matthew Pekka, and Thomas Plekanec. Can you say 28th place?
Yeah. It's yeah. Yeah. I
They
mean,
could come in last. They could.
It's going to be a battle between them and Ottawa. Who can come in last? Who's going to come in last?
Oh,
I still think there's more teams up in that race, though. I do.
It's really funny because they don't need much. Like, I mean, they need a lot of things, but there's guys out there they could get who could play center for them and make them better, and they wouldn't have to give up much. And this is what I don't understand with them. Yeah. And if they're not going to bring in their younger guys like what's his face, the guy they just drafted, Koji Mami, yeah, then what? Shouldn't you shore up something? Like, that's just, it's not that, I have a ton of respect for what these guys are about to go through as players. Like, it's going to be rough, but Bergevin has an obligation to say, I need to get in just a guy who's a placeholder until these things are ready. Because what I have right now is not the future. The future's coming.
That's what they got in Thomas Tatar. I mean, basically. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just such a mess.
Yeah. And regrettably, in this information that we learned about more than a few weeks ago from Kevin Allen when he was talking about the concerns about Henrik Zetterberg that came down I think it was Friday, that he was not going to be able to continue his career. He's got 3 years left in his contract. That's going to end up getting buried on LTIR for the next 3 years. He can't play because of his back, degenerating back injury. And Russ, this is a loss. In talking to some reporters in Niagara Falls, and we as a group asked Mike Babcock about Zetterberg. One of the reporters was talking about a particular penalty kill, a 5-on-3 penalty kill in the 2008 Stanley Cup Final between Detroit and Pittsburgh, and how Zetterberg almost single-handedly killed off 1 minute and 30 seconds of a 5-on-3 penalty. That's the type of player he was. And this is even in his, state where he's limited because of his health problems, he was still an effective player. And I think Detroit's going to be in that battle with Montreal and Ottawa at the bottom of the Atlantic.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do think that unless, the kids just kick in high gear, and you see Zadina just ripping it up, but it's probably not going to happen like that. I don't even know if there's enough around to do it. I don't know if there's enough goaltending. It's a big loss. There's no way. If nothing else, just mentally in that locker room, they're going to miss him.
Yes.
I mean, that's because he was their leader. So and also fans are going to look at it and say, all right, that era is over now. So now we have to flip the switch and start all over again, like when Steve Yzerman was a rookie.
Yep.
That's where they're at.
The only thing left is Nicholas Kronwall.
He's barely there.
Yeah. So
they're in.
And if you're someone who's a fan of a team in the Central Division, you want Detroit to be really bad. You actually want Montreal to be really bad. Just anyone to prevent Colorado from getting Ottawa's draft pick if it's potentially that, right? Like
those teams
the last thing the Central needs is Jack Hughes arriving in Colorado.
Yeah. Those teams are in the running, though.
Yeah, they are. I'm cheering for Detroit.
Okay, a couple other brief notes, then we'll get into our previews. Alexander Barkov named captain of the Florida Panthers. I think he's one of their best players. He's their top center, so it makes a lot of sense. An injury to Carolina forward Victor Rask, according to a report. It was a serious hand injury involving cut tendons and fingers. And according to Rod Brindamore, Rask could be out months. This is not good news, Russ, because in terms of Carolina, I think he scored 17 goals last year, and they were expecting more out of him when they signed that long-term deal. But he's a player who would contribute offense, and they don't have a ton of that. And this just makes the burden on guys like Teravainen and Stahl and the guys who are there even more.
look, I'm telling you, that team does not get better goaltending. They could be they could be the worst team in the league too. It could happen because I don't believe for 1 second in Peter Mrazek. I saw enough out of him. Yeah. I know switching situations, switching goaltending, switching coaches can help somebody, but I'm telling you, I saw a guy that is nowhere near what he was 3 years ago.
And it's ironic because I think it's not arguable. They have one of the best defensive cores in the league, but you can't win if you don't score goals and if your goaltenders don't stop pucks. And that's, your defense can only do so much. So that could be a big loss. We'll track that. Okay. 2 teams. First one.
Well, actually, I one little bit of update.
Go ahead.
So I hear, again, a lot of skepticism on Long Island about the Belmont deal.
Oh, yeah.
And we brought up reasons before, a week ago, like because of the hub and the Coliseum opening up, and they're going to play the Flyers on the 20th, and all those things. Remember, the Coliseum is temporarily NHL approved.
Yes.
So if something were to happen with this Belmont deal, we don't know if Gary Bettman would say, yeah, it's okay to play here on a 5-year or a 10-year lease until we come up with something. We don't know the answer to that. The problem is people who live on the island know that, and especially Islander fans who live on the island know that this deal is supposed to have a groundbreaking this spring. But yet the Long Island Railroad hasn't deemed that thing a regular station. They haven't even finished, like they had a feasibility study, and all I think they said was, yeah, we can't do, like, there was supposed to be like an Oyster Bay tunnel to help people get there. It doesn't seem like that's happening. So they're looking at the railroad. Remember, they have to zone the roads. None of these things have happened yet. And I'm going to wonder in January, if we don't see these things happening, what is actually happening. And this isn't the Islanders' fault. This is, again, like we've talked about for 3 or 4 years, the fault of Long Island.
Yeah,
the problem with
the politics of Long Island going back to the
lighthouse.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on it, but I'm just saying people are a little skeptical right now.
Yeah. Okay. Team number 1 is the Chicago Blackhawks. They went 33, 39, and 10 last year, 76 points. The big problem with them was the injury to Corey Crawford. It basically gave them, I think subpar goaltending with, Jeff Glass. He did his best as he could, but the Anton Forsberg, who we've talked about many a time with, in his days with Columbus, Crawford's back. Apparently it was a concussion issue. But as we know with concussion issues, Russ, they can come back. The thing that with this team that I look, Taves is still, I think he's still very good, but he's, last year he stepped down from being a top 5 center. I think one poll had him outside the top 20. I don't know if I agree with that, but I still think he's effective. And Kane is one of the best forwards in the game, but there's just not a lot of depth there. And their defense, with Seabrook getting older, with Keith at, I think, 35 years old, they don't really have a lot after that. I don't think they're going to rush Adam Boquist to the NHL. I mean, there's not a lot there for the Blackhawks.
There's not. I mean, looking at their defense, it's Keith and Seabrook, and then you're talking about like Eric Gustafson and Jan Ruta and Brandon Manning, who I'm very familiar with, and he's a decent defenseman. Carl Dahlstrom, like they used to depend on their 4, and they rode them into the ground to win championships. They can't do that anymore. They don't have, so they have to have a different kind of system. Offensively, it's interesting because, like, let's say roster resources right, and who knows if they will be, right? But they have like Kunitz, Taves, and DeBrincat first line. They have Saad, Schmaltz, and Kane the second line. I think that second line's pretty good because I do think Schmaltz, who had 52 points, could get like 65 points now that he's getting a little older. He's 22. At some point, it's going to click a little better for him. So there's some more points to be had there. If their third line is Anisimov, Sikora, Dylan Sikora, and John Hayden, I still think that's a pretty good line because the wingers, while they're not elite wingers, they are guys that play a good, solid brand of hockey that could skate, and Anisimov can be the scorer on that line, which he is a pretty good scorer. Like, he's a guy who can get 25 goals every year. So they're 3 lines deep. 4th line, it's Edsel, it's Kruger, and then slot in somebody. When you look at it and then look at the fact that Corey Crawford's probably not starting the season, I think we have to come to grips with that looks like the case, and Cam Ward's probably their starter. Unless they come out of the gate with wins that we don't expect, they're behind the 8 ball before the season even starts.
Yeah, and I question roster resource because Nisimov will be the number 2 center with Kane. He's been and Saad will be with Taves. That was the reason they got Saad in the first place.
I mean, unless they do want to build more lines, then maybe they won't do that.
Right, but go ahead, Peter.
No, I mean they've got challenges, and I think the other thing is like Crawford recovering from whatever he was with this concussion and the severity of that is massive.
Yes,
it's absolutely massive, and no Corey Crawford. I don't think the Blackhawks have a hope. What Taves is so amazing at early in his career 5 years ago, of driving play and being this guy where when he was on the ice, his individual shot attempts are up and his teammates are up. It's going, and it's gradually sort of dipping and going like that on the curve. And that's what you need from him. He's the spiritual leader of this team. And if he can lead spiritually, but if he can't do it physically, it's going to have massive effects. I think things are going to be pretty ugly in Chicago right now. And there's not a lot of help on the horizon, given the 4 massive contracts that they have there's 12 million on defense and 21 million in forwards that they need to, it's $30 million over 4 deals. That's basically crippling this team. It's insane.
And
look at it this way. Crawford literally just took the ice on the 14th. Afterwards, he admitted up to the concussion, and he's not with the team yet.
Yeah.
And he says he's close. He's really close. Okay. Let's say he gets activated in 2 weeks. He's still going to need some time to get into playing shape, or at least practicing with the team. So even the earliest you could consider him coming back is probably middle of October, and that's if everything's great.
Right. Yeah, and the one point I want to make before we move on to Columbus is, of those 4 contracts, actually make it 5, because Crawford's got 2 years left at $6 million. You got the 2 defensemen, Seabrook at almost $7 million for 6 more years, including this year. Keith at 5.5 for 5 years. Taves and Kane at 10.5 for 5 years. Of those 5, Crawford's probably the least tradable right now because of his health concerns. But after that, the most tradable is probably Duncan Keith. I don't, I mean, obviously Kane and Taves have value because of the greatness of the players that they are, but the teams that are probably on the verge of winning a Stanley Cup wanting to add one of those 2 players they're not going to have $10.5 million in available cap space. So Duncan Keith at 5.5, even at 35 years old, is probably the most valuable and the most movable of those guys.
They won't trade.
Absolutely.
They're right.
They need to be open to it. That's the problem. I mean, saying they won't trade him, Russ, like they might not, and you may have all the actual reasons for why they may not. Stan Bowman and his brain trust have to toss those reasons out the window and realize that is your one asset that's the most likely. Because you know what? Keith isn't going to play till he's 39. He's going to retire, and that deal is going to allow him to do it. And that's your tradable thing.
You're right, but here's
considering, guess what? And Keith, like every other deal from those legacy ones, after this year, he only makes $3.5 million, then 2.6, 2.1, 1.5. He's going to do the Zetterberg route. Fine.
You forget what the Blackhawks were like pre-Taves and Kane attendance-wise. It wasn't good. And it wasn't good for years. And so now they haven't surrendered to the fact that they need to rebuild. When they do, Keith will be traded. But I still think that's a year or 2 down the line. I don't think they're ready to throw up the white flag yet.
It was brutal, Russ, for sure. But a lot of what was brutal with the Blackhawks wasn't just the roster; it was how Bill Wirtz managed things too.
Yeah.
You can't. They're not separate issues. So you got to pull them in together.
Kyle Caldwell was one of their best players. I mean, you have to be fair about it.
No. The roster.
Mark Bell.
Yeah.
No, but
yes, okay. Don't keep hitting me with those awful memories. But they're going to be brutal with Keith. Why not be brutal and start the process of decoupling yourself from this? Because eventually it's going to happen.
One thing, and then we'll move on. The cap recapture is what kills you on Keith. If Keith decides he's going to retire before the 5 years and he's on somebody else's roster, I think they get hit with a lump sum. I mean, I know with Weber, it's like if he retires the year before his contract expires, Nashville gets hit with like a $20 million penalty against the cap. So that might be the only thing that keeps Keith there, is the fact that, if you don't come with some sort of side agreement where you trade Keith back to the Blackhawks before he retires, then you're going to get killed. So I don't know. Oh, by the way, from our mouth to the ear of Peter Chiarelli, apparently, Elliot Friedman and John Shannon are both reporting that Edmonton is closing on a deal with Darnell Nurse. So apparently the Morrissey bridge deal was something that they could use. I mean, they haven't announced a bridge deal, but I'm assuming it's a bridge deal. And if it isn't, then we'll talk about it tomorrow. Right. Okay. Finally, the Columbus Blue Jackets, who, made the playoffs last year, had the eventual Stanley Cup champion Capitals down 2-0, but could not stick the stake in their hearts. They went 45-30-7, 97 points. Russ, again, I like this team. I think they have a lot of talent, but right now the overshadowing thing is Panarin and his impending free agency. And we don't know whether they're going to trade him or not, but it sounds like they're going to keep him. And Bobrovsky in the similar situation. They have a lot of young talent, but I don't know, if it's beneficial for them to keep those guys or move one of them or move both of them or whatever. So that's where they are.
Bob, because I don't know who would be their next goalie besides Corpusalo. I don't even know.
Okay, I'll look while you're talking.
So Bob is safe. Like even if he walks at the end of the year and they just trade his rights at the draft to somebody who wants him, he's safe. Panarin,
it's the almighty JF Berube.
Yeah, so if you think John Tortorella is going to put up with JF Berube in net, you got another thing coming. I know I sound like Judas Priest, but anyhow. So here's the thing. I think Panarin stays to start the season. I pretty much always felt that. I think they know what the situation is. We all know what the situation is. Wherever he goes, he will be a rental. And so they're better off trying him out first, because if they can get close to the Stanley Cup, then they'll have a tough decision to make come trade deadline day. But until then, they might as well get his offense and not trade it somewhere else, because they're going to need it. So I think he stays. I look at their team and I see Milano finally going to get a bigger role. That's good, because, I don't know, we had 12, 14 goals with barely playing last year. So I think that could only get better. I think Borgstrand still has a little more to give. I like their fourth line now. Riley Nash there, that's a fourth line, John Tortorella, with him and Dubinsky. Like, that's a fourth line that John Tortorella would get a lot of mileage of. Like, that's a team that will sometimes start out with their fourth line. Like, you can guarantee it against certain teams, they will do that.
You think he's going to be fourth line center?
Dubinsky.
Oh, okay, Dubinsky. Brian Nash will probably be number 3. Will probably be third.
No. Nash is not going to be I think he's going to be a winger, because they've got Dubois, Wenberg, and Foligno. Like,
yeah, I think they're going to move the Foligno was put at center as necessity, not. I don't think I think he's going to go back to the wing.
They might do that. It depends what Torts wants. But anyhow, either way, even if I change it up and yes, so Foligno is the winger, then still they'll have a really good fourth line with whoever is on it.
Agreed.
He's going to, he's going to center it. They're pretty strong at the center position, so that's good for them. Yeah. Defensively, they're very strong. I mean, I like Scott Harrington a lot too. If he breaks in there, that 6 is good. I mean, this is a 6 that you could put up against top 5 in the league. Like, I really think it's that good. And so, goalie, very good. Like, this is a team that should go far. I have to sort of take away any memories of playoff, trouble with them, like I would the Sharks, and treat it fairly. And so I think they're, one of the best teams in the East. I do.
Peter.
I like Columbus, and I like
their third jersey. Sorry, it's really nice.
Yeah. and I like what they could do this year. I mean, you still have some question marks for what happens after this year, but they've got projected deadline cap space of 26 million. They could add here. And if they, they've had their first round woes and such, getting out and everything, but they're a team that shouldn't be taken easily. And I think if Bobrovsky plays to Bobrovsky's level, there's a really good chance something good happens here. I don't know if they need something more to get over the hump, though. And that's what I'd like to see them do. Like, they're not there yet, but they're going to be in the conversation for the season. It's whether they can add something or make a change to get through to the next or that next level. But there's something likable about this team. You got Wenberg, Werenski. I mean, obviously Panarin, but there's just kind of a, Pierre-Luc Dubois. There's just kind of a neat sort of Seth Jones. There's a neat kind of core here that could start taking over. And I think there's some real upside to Columbus, but I think they're still missing something.
There's a great quote that came out of camp the other day. Aaron Laporte put it up. So in a scrimmage, Nick Foligno got hit by Josh Anderson. They collided. And basically Foligno said, "Did you see that? What an idiot." I was like, "What are you doing?" And he got the worst of it. That was the best part. My jaw is killing me. I said, "Take out a young kid, not me."
Well, I'll just say this, and then we have to end the show because we're coming up on. The funny thing is, I look at three teams, and Columbus is one of them. Columbus, Winnipeg, and Toronto, all in a similar position where I think they all can be contenders or all are contenders. They all have cap space for 1 year. And teams like a team like Ottawa with Duchesne and Stone, if their goal is to trade one of those or both of them, which we don't know, right? Because the chaotic situation in Ottawa, or Wayne Simmons with Philadelphia, or any of the pending unrestricted free agents that'll be free next summer, these teams have the ability to fit those guys under their cap with the cap space that they have. So you should watch Winnipeg, Columbus, and Toronto for those type of players. Maybe a Rick Nash return is in the future in Columbus or in Toronto. They have options, and with them being at the top ends of their conferences, I think those trades or that type of signings like Nash could happen. But we'll see. We got to end the show.
I got to say one last thing about Nash.
Yeah,
it's up to Rick Nash. Like, that's the whole thing.
Nash, definitely. And Elliot Friedman said something.
Well, that's a great point. Rick, go sign a 1-year deal with Columbus and see what you can do.
It could be still wants to play. He may not want to play anymore.
Yeah, he just had a third child. He had a concussion in March with
That's what I think we're all forgetting. Like, we could put Rick Nash on a lot of rosters and he would help a lot of teams. We don't know if he wants to play anymore.
Yeah.
But he's been remarkably quiet this summer too. Like, there's been not a lick of information.
His agent basically said status quo. But you know what? It could be a Matt Sundin situation, Peter. He could come back in January if he wants to play.
Bad idea.
I know it's a bad idea. But you're already in camp, so it's not going to happen. Anyway,
like Peter Forsberg. Oh wait, my foot feels better. What is it? How many games left? Like 10? Yeah, I can play.
How many millions of dollars can I make? Thanks.
Yeah, but Forsberg, I mean, that guy was otherworldly.
I'm not disputing that. Okay, we will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Eklund should be back. For Peter Tessier, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.